I made the decision, and it's my decision. That's what Terry Pegula, owner of both of the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres professional sports team, said in his press conference this morning about his decision to fire head coach of the Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott. And as controversial as this decision has been publicly to the nation, probably internationally to the world, personally, as a Bills fan, I was very displeased to learn that they had fired the head coach. But what I admire is how Terry just said he's standing on business. It's his business. He's the owner, and he makes the decisions. He said, I made the decision, and it's my decision. Point blank, period. And that is the audacity. That is the energy. That is the embodiment that I'm going to move in and that I'm going to take with me, because it's my business. Like, my life is my business. And the decisions that I make are my decisions. So when I make a decision, I made a decision, and it was my decision. In all reality, if we take a look, we don't know what the decision-making process was. As a logical person and as a intellectual person, I would like to assume certain things about him being the owner of not just this sports team, the Buffalo Bills, but also another sports team, the Buffalo Sabres, which is the professional hockey team. I would like to assume that there was a robust and rigorous decision-making process, that there was a lot of thought that went into this, that there was collaboration that happened, especially when we're talking about who the GM is, who has now been promoted to, like, I think head of football operations. Like, he got a promotion, and there's controversy with that as well too. But I would like to think that the process, his decision-making process, was methodical. But more than anything, what that statement said to me, I made a decision, it was my decision, was the embodiment and the understanding of, like, as the owner, I have to own the outcomes of my team. I own this team, I have to own the outcomes. And he was dissatisfied with the fact that though the Buffalo Bills have been making playoffs and winning certain playoff games and even won some conference championships, that as a team, as an organization, they still have not won a Super Bowl. The Bills are completely Super Bowl winless. Been to the Super Bowl a handful of times in the early 90s, hadn't been to the playoffs in a decade or more by the time that Sean McDermott came, and he's led the team to a few playoff rounds and a few playoff wins, but not the ultimate game, right? And as a competitor, as an owner, as somebody looking at the business of football, he has to be concerned with the business of football. That's what his concern has to be. Now, there were questions asked during this press conference, particularly around personnel, right? Around the roster, around the players that they're bringing into the organization, which is the choice of more Brandon Bean, who is like the general manager. He kind of makes the final decisions around that. But even with that, I'm sure the owner has to chime in, or like has to give his blessing, so to speak. However, they did mention that they want this process to be more collaborative and be more of a team effort type of thing. So now, as a fan of the Buffalo Bills, as a lifetime Buffalo resident, that the culture in this city in particular, but in that team specifically, is a very unique culture. And I don't know, but I'm thinking that where they are getting it wrong as males, and specifically white males who are privileged and who have a certain level of protection from different experiences, what they're not seeing is that they need better culture fits, better talent, of course, on the field talent, but off the field as well. They need to get they need to bring a more holistic approach to when they're considering people that they want to bring into the team, because again, the culture is very specific. in Buffalo, not just the fan base and the Bills Mafia, but very specific in the city and the demographics and the history. Buffalo is a very culturally rich history, but we're still also a very segregated city. We're still also we still exist in these very binary experiences and understandings. The Buffalo Bills themselves has a lot of controversy surrounding them as an organization. When the former owner moved the stadium from outside the actual city of Buffalo out to about 20 to 30 minutes outside of the city at Orchard Park, where they were playing at the old stadium, and now we're going to be playing at the new stadium in the new season. So there's a lot of lore and mythos that surrounds the Buffalo Bills as an organization, but the city of Buffalo in general, in itself, this area being in this part of New York where we are, being very rich culturally, as far as being part of the area that was first settled by colonists when they came to these, what we call these here Americas, the Erie Canal, Lackawanna being a bustling manufacturing area, the Rust Belt, the Great Migration being a part of one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. We're literally 10 minutes outside of Niagara Falls. We're right. Canadian border is right there. You can get to Canada. We're actually closer to Canada than we are to New York City proper. And so, again, very culturally rich place with that exists. Well, that this organization has to exist in this paradigm that is in and of itself has its own culture and its own history. And the piece that they're probably missing, which is more of the feminine piece, because, football is a very male sport. But the feminine piece that they're missing is that holistic embodied piece, and implementing into their operating systems, implementing that identity, and implementing that what their players, what their coaches, what their front office staff, back office staff, who are those people and what do they need to bring to the organization. I'll speak particularly about two players, Keon Coleman and Josh Allen. I personally like Keon Coleman because I like New Orleans, right? And again, I'm from Buffalo. I know Buffalo culture. I've visited New Orleans, went to New Orleans one time. I've always liked New Orleans culture just from it being introduced to the millennial zeitgeist by celebrities like Cash Money Records, like Lil Wayne and Baby and the Big Timers. Like, I always was drawn to, like, oh wow, it's so bright and so vibrant and so colorful and so multi-ethnic and so heterogeneous and so many different people. Like, that's where you get Creole from, is New Orleans and Louisiana, is that culture. And for me personally, to bring a player like that, who is not just from New Orleans, which is like a very culturally rich city, is not so obviously segregated as it is here, to bring a player like that into this type of organization, into this type of structure, that's not a good cultural fit. Even though they loved them, like, oh my God, he was telling so many jokes and he was this and he was that. And I knew, like, oh, they are gonna expect him to be a court jester, basically. Like, he's young, he's vibrant, he's different, he's got that accent, he's got a great sense of humor. He was raised very culturally Black, so he's coded as very culturally Black. And to YT people, that's exciting. Oh my God, look at him, he's so funny and he's telling all these great jokes. And I knew he wasn't gonna be a good cultural fit here because Buffalo is too different. Not even just in culture, but in the weather. It's cold as hell here. You coming from New Orleans, basically the swamp. You coming from the swamp, you coming from the warmth, you're coming from vibrant people, a culture that is very rich and still very much rooted in what it means to be Black, more African, Afrocentric Blackness, to great migration, different cultures. No one is better than the other, just different, just very different. I know he wasn't going to be successful here. And then when you talk about a player like Josh, people love a player like a Josh Allen here because he is embodiment of the great. He's this great big, even when you hear like NFL commentators talk about him, like they talk about him like he's a Greek god. Like they talk about his physique and his figure, and oh, he's strong and he runs good and he's got a slingshot of an arm. Like they say all kinds of stuff. Even a player like a Josh Allen is not a good cultural fit here because he's a California. He's too privileged to play in this city, in this system. He's way too privileged. Like, I don't think know or care to know or understand the implications of somebody like him who comes from a very privileged background. Like, his family owns a cotton farm out in California, some small town California, where he was the star quarterback and played at a field that was named after his. He doesn't have enough to make it in this city. In a different city, like maybe like Miami, in a coach in like a climate that's a little bit more laid back, it's not as tough, you don't have to be as rough. Physique, Josh Allen always collapses because he doesn't identify with the identity that the league has given him. He's not this tough, rough, rugged player mentally. Mentally, he does not have the mental fortitude to be in a team like he's like a Pop-Tart. He's soft on the middle, and it's nothing. That's not an indictment against him and his character. It's just not a good fit for a city like Buffalo, who has the history of being the laughingstock of being in a place where it's cold more often, of having to come into an organization with the history that it has, in the city with the history that. I would be surprised even any of the players on the Bills who aren't from Buffalo, if anybody in the Bills organization could give you a history of just the city of Buffalo, of this area, of the native pop, of the history of how Buffalo was built up, of the history of the Underground Railroad, Niagara Falls. You know what? Josh Allen might be able to do Niagara Falls because him and Peyton Manning did a ritual where they were supposedly banning the curse of Ralph Wilson for building a stadium on an ancient native burial ground. I said all of that to say, with the Buffalo Bills and Terry Pegula and Brandon being in the organization, is they're updating their operating system. They were looking, they're out, they're doing an evaluation, and they said going into the new season, we need to do a so that we can base on this new operating system. Like we need a new so that we can start seeing the successes and the things that we want to see, because as of right now, the Bills as an organization has not owned, acted, or implemented the identity that the NFL and that even the Bills Mafia fan base has been trying to give them. Hey, you guys are winners. You guys are Super Bowl contenders. You guys are division champions. They're still acting, thinking, behaving, and playing like. That's an evaluation. That's an option. Value it's costing them. It's costing them for them to keep playing, and so there has to be an expansion. So what I'm learning from this process and what is watching or who has heard of it is that I made the decision. It was my make. And he's right. The decisions and the choices that you have to make when it comes to you, the things that you are responsible for, the things that you own, namely yourself, your body, your identity, your own infrastructure, your own operating systems. When it comes to those things, when it comes to the things that are your business, when it comes to handling your business and conducting, there are decisions that you have to make because they are your decisions to make. And sometimes you are going to face the backlash of other people outside of you externally, but also internally of your system, readjusting in that implementation, in that transition period. There is going to be some right condemnations of your choices and your decisions, again, from the outside and on the inside, coming up out of you. you feeling insecure, you questioning your decisions, you questioning your decision-making capacity, you questioning if you are truly the person who can step into this life, or if you're an imposter and a fraud. That is a normal part of the process, but don't allow the fear of the backlash, or the fear of the pain, or the fear of the discomfort, or your intolerance for the uncertainty of what's going to happen next to stop you from making the decisions that need to be made. It was Terry's decision to make, and he made it. The reality is that although we can make an evaluation from the outside looking in, from the inside looking, we don't know all of what into the decision making. We don't know all of the intricacies. We don't know all of the metrics. We don't know none of that. But ultimately, we're not going to know the outcome of the decision until this time next year, or even this time in 2028, 2029. We're not going to know. But there was a decision that needed to be made, and the person who had to make the decision, good, bad, and that's a lesson in being a grown-up, being an adult, and being that's just how it is. That's just how. Shout out to the bill.